How is everyone this morning? I see a thumbs up. Audio's coming through.
All good, thank you.
All righty. Well, we will be recording our webinar today, so once we're finished here, I'll clean everything up and make sure that everyone can have a copy of this. So if you kind of zone out for a moment or have to take a phone call or anything like that, that is fine, because we will capture it all and share it afterwards. Just a little housekeeping. I am BK. I am the director of Pennsylvania Park Maintenance Institute. So we were going to launch this year. I've been around since January, and we had a little curveball thrown at us in March. So we pivoted, and we're going to go virtual and try to create a little bit of presence while we can, focusing on specifically maintenance topics, and that's going to be everything from turf management, like we're talking about today, to operations, to administrative kind of things. And so one of my answers to one of the questions that all of us have is, how do we keep on top of maintenance issues even though not everybody's around? And there's certain things that have to happen, and we know that, but how do we communicate that to the powers that be, and how can we do that most efficiently? So that's what our focus for today is. I ask you, please use the chat box. If you are not familiar with Zoom, look at the bottom of your screen there. There is a chat box tool. Type in questions as we go through. We are here. I have a few kind of scripted questions to go over with our panel. But we will also like to hear your questions and follow topics that are most interesting to you. So before we really get into too many details, I would like to introduce our panel of experts. And so from our sponsors, Toro, we have two representatives. First, I'd like to introduce Boyd Montgomery. Boyd, would you like to, is there anything you'd like to add?
Thank you. Well, pleasure to be here, and look forward to trying to share some insights around turf grass maintenance and sport field maintenance. So anything we can try to answer, I look forward to trying to help.
And also from Toro, I have Matt Anderson.
Hello, everybody. My name's Matt. I've worked for Toro for about a year. Prior to that, I've been a sports turf manager for about 15 years, various stops, including minor league baseball and the college and university world. So happy to be a part of the group.
And from our distinguished advisory board, we have Rebecca Auchter from Advanced Turf Solutions.
Hey folks, I'm over here in the western side of the state, in the Pittsburgh area, and like Matt, I have I'm relatively new to Advanced Turf Solutions, but I've been around the grounds maintenance in parks capacity, schools and universities for many years. So hopefully I can contribute to the conversation here today.
And last but not least, from Penn State Extension, we have Jeff Fowler.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you're all doing well and staying safe and healthy. I have been with Penn State for more years than I'm going to tell you.
Hey, I don't see gray. I don't see gray there.
I started when I was 3. And I'm 34 years old. No, I've been with them for 31 years, working with sports and grounds, golf courses, athletic fields, turf, lawns, sod farms, you name it. I've probably been a part of it in the state of Pennsylvania, and if it's on the East Coast, I probably was a part of it at some point in time as well. It's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to trying to, trying to help you answer any questions that you have during these incredibly interesting times.
Well, thank you for everyone being here, and working with me on my first attempt at getting some discussion going between park maintenance professionals. Kicking it off, of course, probably one of the most topics on top of everybody's mind is, what have we done to change our operations immediately? You know, what kind of pivoting have we had to do because of either safety issues or disinfecting issues or things? What are some things that have impacted immediately our operations?
Are you
Kind of an
looking?
open question.
You look. One of the things that I've seen most out there is not a change in maintenance practices as much as a change in labor status. There's only so much that you can do with a limited number of people. So prioritizing what absolutely has to be done, like, you know, garbage, litter, restroom management, sanitizing practices, everything else that's getting done seems to be a matter of what labor is left over. Anybody else seen a different view?
Yep. You know, I've been on a number of these virtual meetings now that have been participating in across the U.S. And, you know, what if there's a common theme, I guess I would say that there's just a lot of ambiguity between, you know, just what people are able to do and what they can do. You know, I think really a lot of the impact comes down to what they're allowed to do, and a lot of it comes to having to do stuff around the labor side of it. You know, either split the shifts up and have different people come in on either different days, different weeks, to try to, you know, isolate staff if there is an issue that it does arise. A lot of what I'm hearing as we're you know, involved with these sessions are folks that have to you know, one piece of equipment for operation for their staff. So if they're sending them out on vehicles, they're sending them out individually, and each of those vehicles, if it be you know, a car or a utility vehicle, has to be wiped down and cleaned after every use. So there's a lot more sanitizing going on around that. Team meetings, a lot of the grounds folks have team meetings in the morning to sort of, you know, divide and conquer the activities that are needing to be done, and seeing a lot of those get either facilitated more maybe outside, where it's more the social distancing aspect that you can do, or via video conference with the team to get them rolling as well. So that's sort of some of the things that I've seen as I've participated in a lot of these individual calls.
Dan, take your dog down from the screen, would you? Dan Douglas has got his dog up there. He can't go anywhere without his dog, or his dog can't go anywhere.
Leave me alone.
Probably the biggest change I've seen is, as Boyd has already said, is in meetings like this. People, Zoom used to be a foreign word, and now everybody. I mean, Penn State, we've been using it for I don't know, probably 5 years, and now everybody has used it and is using it and is figuring it out, including people that are using it on their smartphones and other devices, in addition to what Rebecca and Boyd have already said.
Are you Zooming your crew out there on the fields though, or is it still daily huddles? And, you know, have that really, your shop operations, have those kind of things gone that way too, or do you see it going that way?
I know I've spoken to a couple of people, a good friend of mine that works at a university. They have a facilities management kickoff meeting every morning with the director of facilities maintenance, and each crew reports to a empty classroom on campus, spaced out like a lecture hall, and they get a daily video briefing from the director of facilities management while everybody is separate. So there's probably 400 or 500 people interacting every morning through all that campus technology infrastructure.
Okay, well, while we think a lot of our crews may be down because of different issues and topics around the country in a sense, and so one important thing for everyone to remember is, of course, grass is a living organism. So what are some really absolute minimal things that we have to do to make sure that our turf grass stays healthy? Because even though we have to cut budgets, or where can we cut corners, or where are things that we cannot cut corners on?
There are a lot of things that we can get by without doing. A lot of things, and of course we'd like to be able to do it all, but as some people have said, we have limited staff. We have to, the absolute thing that has got to be done is we've got to mow. We have to mow on a regular basis, and we cannot step away from that, because that's the beginning of the end. So we have to mow on a regular basis, and quite honestly, if we want to improve the health of our plants on our fields right now, is to mow one additional time. Now, to say that when we're in times when we're just trying to barely get by is crazy, I know, but one additional time will improve the quality of your field tremendously, just with the practice of the simple practice of mowing.
Yeah, I would agree with Jeff. I mean, the mowing aspect is critical during this time. There's definitely things that you can do as a turf manager, if it be active parks where it's sports fields and those type of things, to passive parks that might be more, just more recreational and open fields. They all still need to be maintained and taken care of, because if you don't get out there and mow during this time period, it really is going to set you back, especially once things start to come back online. I was on a call the other day, and it had a mixture of not only Parks and Rec folks, but some professional folks and college and universities. And I think the underlying theme with most of the folks that were on the call that were able to do maintenance was sort of looking at 2-week window blocks and sort of saying, okay, if I'm gonna do some additional maintenance outside of the mowing, I'm gonna do it so I know my fields are gonna be ready in a 2-week window. So looking at it in those type of a chunk and time frame, can I do the mowing? Can I do maybe another additional practice? One of the things that I think I've heard as a common theme on most calls that I've been on, and it's great to hear, is everybody is really, if they're able to get out and do the work on their fields with minimal staff, is aerification. A lot of folks are getting out, poking holes, trying to aerify some of the fields that they're taking care of, just to try to improve some of the aspects of being able to grow some healthy growth grass plants once it comes. But mowing is, I mean, if you have to look at, I only have one thing I can do as far as the maintenance aspect on things. Mowing is going to be a critical key aspect to get done.
I know I've talked to a few people who initially struggled a little bit not having any events, because that event prep seems to always drive their thinking about where to put resources. So pivoting from that, I think, was a little bit of growing pains for some. But what I'm hearing is some budgets are being frozen or held even for materials. So you may want to apply a plant growth regulator, but you're not allowed to spend the money to get it. So you have to keep that mowing going. So I think guys are using the tools that are in their barn, whether it's mowing, maybe they're getting their aerator out or their verticutter out, or they're just doing those cultural practices that they can, that don't necessarily require them to order a product or, you know, step outside what they already have in place.
It seems like everybody, you know, obviously mowing thing, but there's definitely some, you know, money budget being saved or at least not allocated for labor. I think without a lot of traffic on athletic fields, it's pretty safe to say that we can cut back on fertility, and we can cut back on control products like herbicides, like fungicides, or anything that might fall in that category. The one really interesting opportunity has been that sports fields, especially in parks, are just so rarely closed or any kind of resting period scheduled for them. Certainly none of us would have chosen this rest, but since we have it, there's an opportunity to really do some seeding, even if it's just broadcast seeding and, you know, kind of pushing the seed into seed to soil contact with, you know, some sort of a, you know, a knobby tire, even if it's that minor, if there's not the labor and the equipment to do a more sophisticated seeding operation, to get some seed on the ground. Where often there's not the opportunity because there's constant traffic on athletic fields. And even to expand on that a little bit, you know, perennial ryegrass, turf type tall fescue are often the choices on athletic fields where there's just ongoing traffic because those seedlings are tough enough to take it. But I've seen a number of soccer, football fields that we've seeded in with a regular rate of Kentucky bluegrass, because we're going to have time to get that to maturity before there's traffic on it. So it's not a big expense. You know, obviously we're saving on a lot of fertility, other control products, and some labor. So it you know, with the folks that I'm dealing with, there's been a justification for some of that seed, so that when we do open back up, we have a better stand of turf grass than when the fields got closed.
You bring up a point that someone brought up a question because of the pandemic and the high traffic areas, basically what they've needed to do to deter people from being out on the sports fields, because even though you say they're closed, people are still playing. They've let things go taller. So for example, going to 4 inches being as opposed to 2.5. And so trying to keep people off the fields in different ways by making it basically not a nice playing surface. So the question is, you know, as they need to transition back gradually, so what are some things that maybe they can do, or are there ways to cut corners to get back a little bit faster, or is it 1/3 rule and that's it?
I have never been a proponent of changing the mowing height, even when it's not being used. I think you get a mowing height with cool season grasses. Get a mowing height and stay with it. I think that if we allow it to go longer, yes, the roots go deeper, and we know that from research. It's almost directly proportionate to the green growth is the root depth underneath, but it's also transversely, as soon as we mow it short, the roots are going to be short. So I have never been a proponent of changing mowing height. So I say go to 2 and leave it at 2 and don't mess with it. But I also know, I'm also realistic enough to know that in some instances we can't get to those properties to get them mowed. But that's just my.
Yeah, I would echo with Jeff in my previous life. I mean, what I found to be successful is to really pick, you know, one mowing height and stay with it. So, you know, in this time when we probably can't mow as frequently as because maybe labor restrictions, or maybe it's just plain, you know, you can only have X amount of days that you can get out to do the maintenance because of the use of the parks. That's another common theme, is that, you know, generally for the most part, there's a fairly decent window during season that, you know, Parks and Rec folks have time to get out on the fields and take care of them, because folks are in school, folks are at work. And now that the new norm is the work from home, and they need to find a way to get out and recreate, it's consuming a lot of that time that the you know, the turf managers and that have to be able to do some of those maintenance practices. So, you know, I think the mowing height, if you can stay consistent with it, if it be at 2 inches, if it be at 3 inches, I would stay consistent with it. And you know, if it is a situation where you know, the grass does get away a little bit, just strongly recommend, you know, practice that 1/3 rule when you do remove that turf, because if you do go in and really, you know, buzz it off to try to get back to a somewhat you know, plain surface that everybody wants to go on, not only do you have the windrows that you're going to have to deal with, but you're potentially shutting off that root growth or any growth down below there, because the plant has to recover from that shock that you've just put it in.
I just had a question come through. What should an ideal mowing height should be for ball fields versus other park areas?
You know, I guess I would take that there probably be a multitude of answers to that question based on the situation that you're dealing with. You know, if you're able to stay at your normal mowing practices that you were doing before the pandemic, and you're able to get out there with a decent frequency, then it's probably your mowing height's going to be relative to your cultivar of grass that you have, as well as the expectation of your user groups. Maybe on a Kentucky Blue, it might be, if it's a newer cultivar, it might be an inch, 1.25 inches. You know, but there is, you know, you got to take that in consideration. That's probably post-pandemic issue. And again, if you're not going to have the labor and the personnel to be able to get out there and stay up with that frequency, then I think you need to look at, you know, how do I maybe allow it to grow a little bit higher, you know, which might cut down on the amount of frequency of mowing that you have to do, and maintain it at that consistent height at that new level, until we get back to a semblance of, you know, activity going to be starting and being active on the turf. So I don't know if anybody else has a opinion on that.
I manage recreational fields in parks for many, many years. So, you know, assuming that you're talking about a recreational level soccer, football, lacrosse field, I would say 2 inches. If you're talking about, you know, a recreational level baseball, softball field, 2.5, maybe even 3 inches you could get away with. And your common areas, 3 to 3.5 inches. I mean, you know, the more, the higher level of expectation from your athletic field, probably the lower the height. But just for general recreational use, those are the rules of thumbs that I would throw out there.
And of course, none of us yet have even mentioned the word irrigation. That's assuming no irrigation on those fields and stuff like that. So there's lots of, as Boyd said, there's lots of balls that we need to keep in the air. Just saying a specific height isn't there's not a prescription.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with the other guys. As far as what I've seen over the years in a recreational setting, we can get reasonable ball roll and play and performance, at those heights I mentioned, but there's so many specific scenarios where you might want to choose a different height.
So I guess a question, what if I don't follow the rules? What is some of the key considerations or negative impacts if we neglect? What are some of the things that, if we happen to let this field go, what will it take to get it back to normal?
Well, I guess I would say it depends on, I guess the surface level. If we're talking about ball fields, soccer fields, lacrosse fields, and I've been on a few calls where the folks haven't even been, they shut down March 31st, and they're not coming back until next week, and haven't been able to do any level of maintenance on any of their fields. Now they did do some work when they got notice that was going to be the plan, with doing some trying to figure out how could we stunt the growth enough to get through that. You can do that with some plant growth regulators if you have the ability or maybe even budget money to do that. But a lot of folks don't have that capability. So the grass starts to get away from them. What I've heard has been not necessarily the positive out of this, but what has been at least working on the side of the turf managers in the northern markets is, the growing seasons are just starting. You're just coming out of that winter, the cold, getting that active growing temperature in the soil to the point where the grass plant's starting to wake up and starting to grow. So, if as long as their ability to start getting back and maybe doing some more, doing some mowing and staying on top of it, they weren't that concerned about it. But, if it's a situation where, you're shut out, you can't get in there and mow, I think, you're going to have to look at, how do I get in with, a mower once I'm able to get back in there, and again, work that grass plant down. And I think one of the things, we can talk about some of the maintenance practices that we need to do on the field. I think one of the key things for turf managers, as they start to see a light at the end of the tunnel where activities and that are going to be coming back on the field, I would have strongly encouraged start that communication, if it hasn't already, with your managers and your directors around the expectation as far as based on what you're able to do, or based on what you're not able to do, what is going to be needed to get that field back in a safe, playable condition for those people that are going to be coming back onto the facilities. Because to wait until the switch gets thrown on and to say, whoa, I need 2 weeks or 3 weeks, or we need to do some major renovation to try to get it back into shape, is probably not going to be the best way to handle that as we go forward.
I think, to echo what Boyd just said, the more you let things go, the more time it's going to take you to get things back to an acceptable level. And I think that can be a little bit of a moving target depending on your unique local situation. But having that communication and trying to have those conversations upstream would be beneficial. I think everyone recognizes that the news around the coronavirus seems to happen fast, and things change. Some days it feels like the news changes by the hour. So being able to forecast out, okay, we're going to open fields on Monday. You don't want to get yourself kind of stuck in a situation where you haven't been saying, hey, we're going to need 2 or 3 weeks to kind of get back to where we need to be to meet the public's expectation.
as a quick example from my experience, back when I was in Nashville, North Carolina, we were going through the gas crisis, and the city decided to basically shut down all mowing for a week in order to, help out the cause, so to speak. And what we found was it cost 3 to 4 times as much to catch up after the fact than if we had just continued with the normal mowing. So that's just that's a story I've been relaying to a few people if they need some ammunition, so to speak, is to say why these minimal things are necessary. So that was just one story that you can relay if it helps.
So as we do say minimal, what are some things that we can plan and make sure that we have in our daily, weekly, monthly, seasonally kind of operation schedules and things? What are some of those key components that we should be thinking about in that kind of mindset, so we don't get caught, or at least we know when things do happen in the future, we are ready for something, then we know what we need to do and the essential options.
I think one thing we haven't talked about yet, besides mowing, I think it's important that whoever's managing these facilities is getting out and just doing kind of a visual inspection. Whether you're riding around in a cart or a truck and you're walking fields and you're trying to proactively look for issues that are out there, so you don't get a situation where you maybe haven't been to a site for a week or two and something has happened that kind of throws you a curveball. You want to make sure that you know what's going on out there, even if it is minimal maintenance. I also think if you have them, you want to not forget about like your baseball and softball infields. I think it's very easy to say, oh, we don't have any play, we don't have to worry about the baseball fields. But just a routine drag once a week on the field, on the warning track if you have it, will go a long ways to keeping those surfaces decently level, keeping weeds from coming up in them. I know I've seen instances where a high school might not touch their softball field for the entire summer and the infield just turns into a big weed patch. And then the crew spends a week sod cutting out the weeds and getting things graded back. And, they think that that's a way to save some effort over the summer, when really if you just spent the 15 or 20 minutes to drag it to keep those weeds down, kind of to Patrick's point, if you would have just done some of that maintenance up front, you wouldn't have to put that effort in on the backside.
I'll speak to, the minimum maintenance. What do we do when it's time to open back up? Well, hopefully you can kind of find your spot in the plan you already had. Are we in summer? Are we already in fall? Is it a couple of weeks from now? So presumably you have some sort of a maintenance plan. You can find your spot in there and return to it. If you don't have a maintenance plan, or you're severely restricted in budget and labor for the rest of the year, then you're going to have to adapt that plan. And I think a tremendous resource right now is, and I'm not advocating this, but everybody who's on the panel today is a member of Sports Turf Managers Association, STMA. Right now, for other folks who aren't members there, if you sign up as a guest, you get access to all of the resources that the STMA website has to offer. So if you don't have a program, and you're wondering, okay, what's a minimum program that I could put on a recreational field, university field, whatever it may be, there's resources on STMA's site. And right now you can get all those resources for free just by signing up as a guest. So that might be a really good place if you're wondering what's my program. Certainly, the 40 minutes or so that we have left to talk here today is not enough time to go into all of those details. So you can find some prescriptions, sort of, if you will, already prepared there.
Bouncing off that as well, I threw in the chat box there the park maintenance website. I have opened up all of our resources for the time being as a best interest for the community at large for park maintenance resources. Our model was to be subscription based, but since things are going right now, we didn't feel it was the best time to push on that angle. So we have put everything out there.
I think Rebecca brings up a great point about the STMA, and I wouldn't forget about not only the Park Maintenance Institute resources, but also CAFMO that's local. But I think the key thing to understand right now is these are new waters for everybody, and everybody's in the same boat. We don't know what it's going to be, and how it's going to be once everything comes back online. So there's a lot of folks needing to adjust, needing to try to figure out a new way of doing things for the time being until we get back to some normal. So I would strongly encourage, use these groups, use your peers, reach out to them via phone or via video, and pick their brains. I mean, that's probably the best thing around any of these groups is just the willingness to share ideas and what they're experiencing, so you can be better prepared to help your cause, as well as maybe learn a few things that you maybe could use upstream with your management, and that to maybe get some things that you want.
There's one thing I've been emphasizing in a lot of the talks like this one is the best management practices document that both National is doing one, the Mid-Atlantic STMA is doing one, they're doing one down in the Carolinas. This scenario that we're in right now is a perfect example of why we need these BMP documents. This is something that could be given to all of our employers. When the argument first started being made of who is essential, what is minimum maintenance? All of this in one document that we could hand to somebody and say, here it is, this is what we do. So if anybody's not familiar with what's going on with the BMPs, I suggest, look, to National or your local STMAs, and they could be working on one now, because I know there's a lot going on with that right now. So just throwing it out there for when this stuff comes down the pipe again, because it's going to, we'll have something there and ready, locked and loaded to put forth.
That poses a great question then, in a sense. So if we had to prioritize, in a sense, what would be some of the top tier minimal requirements, and then what are things that, these are nice to have? I mean, we said mowing so far is basically probably the top in that sense, or am I wrong? What?
I would say, probably if you're looking at a checklist of minimal items that you're going to try to accomplish in a restricted area or restricted ability to do that based on if it be labor or rules in your neighborhood or in your region. Mowing's right there. Irrigation, if you have the ability to irrigate your turf, especially if you're taking care of sports fields. Now, the thing with irrigation, though, is you need to understand, what is needed by the plant. You just don't want to irrigate to keep it green. You want to put them, what that plant needs to be being able to grow. You put too much water down, you're going to get succulent growth, and it's going to grow quick, and then maybe your maintenance practice might not match up to, or your mowing practice might not match up to your ability to keep it mowed and keep it maintained that way. But if you look at you look at the mowing, you look at irrigation. I think those are critical items that are at a minimum need to be sort of looked at and done as you go. All the other stuff around as far as like fertility and those type of things, I think you can really adjust those programs because you don't want to be putting down a lot of fertility that's going to boost growth and encourage it if you don't have, again, the ability to maintain and mow that in some restrictions. One of the things that I've heard over the last few weeks, which is interesting because it was there was a lot of I guess I would say, again, a lot of guesswork on what could we do, what can't we do. But I was on a few calls where there was some question, there was minimal maintenance that was able to be done. And these were on the golf course side of things. And they were actually in a few regions, they were still trying to go out and rank bunkers and do that kind of work. And in one instance, the cops stopped at the course and actually was questioning them why they were ranking the bunkers. So, I think what I've heard over the last couple of weeks, and there's been a lot of public policing, I guess you would say, of activities that could be done. I think the public is aware of, we need to do some maintenance, but do we need to weed whip or have that type of activity going on right now and not in areas like that? So we're seeing as I'm involved with some of these groups, you're seeing more and more stories as far as how the public's calling the GM or calling the city and complaining because there's activities that are going on the facilities that they are questioning of, are they needed at this time? So some of them might be justified, some of them might not be, but it seems like you got to be aware of that public perception in a time where people are being asked to stay home and not go out.
I think if I was going to put my turf manager hat back on, if I was able to keep my mowing frequency at a decent level, I would want to take advantage of having time with no use on athletic fields. Kind of like Rebecca said earlier, I would want to try and address problem areas. So do I have some seed in the barn that I can work on some thin spots or some high traffic spots? Can I get a jump on some aerification where normally we couldn't close down a field in the spring because of use? Now I'm able to get out and do some of that work. Boyd mentioned irrigation. Do I have the time and ability to do an irrigation audit on my facility because we're not prepping for games and the fields are going to be closed? So if things get a little wet, running sprinklers, it's no big deal. What are those things where we can take advantage of some of this downtime that, hopefully you're never going to get again, is where my mind would go with some of that.
The other, maybe taking a more specifically agronomic stab at the question, I would look at athletic fields in parks, which is, essentially what we're talking about, turf and athletic fields in parks as public assets, right? We don't need to let our assets deteriorate. So do we have to maintain them in game-ready condition? No, absolutely not. We may be able to significantly back off fertility and that sort of thing. But I would also argue that there's a place possibly for some of the control products that we normally use. Why would we take an athletic field and let it get polluted with crabgrass or goosegrass or any of those kind of things? The methods to deal with those later, let's say we don't open up until June and July and we already have a significant population of crabgrass and goosegrass and that sort of thing. The labor, the chemical needed to control those at that time is more expensive than using preventive measures now. And, to jump on with what Patrick was talking about, the additional labor, the additional products needed down the road, when we could simply and inexpensively do some preventive things now, so that our assets are not deteriorated. They're not loaded with broadleaf weeds. They're not loaded with crabgrass, goosegrass, and that sort of thing, which are not going to make for good playing surfaces down the road when fields do open. So I think that there's absolutely justification for that.
Yeah, one of our group members brings up an interesting point in the chat pod, that a lot of those things are under public scrutiny more so than they've ever been before. They're being asked to sit at home or stay home, and here we are out doing practices that we want to be able to get away with, and it is a real balancing act of what we can need, or what we can do and what we need to do in the eyes of the public. So it's a great point, George, that aerification certainly is one of those things that we would love to be able to get out there and do, because we can shut these fields. We don't even have to shut them down because they are shut down. Just hop in and aerify them, overseed them, top dress them, make them what we've wanted to make them for a long time, and boom, here we go. Now people are being critical of what's happening.
Yeah, I think it's again with aerification, it's a lack of understanding. I think Patrick, mentioned that in his chat. I think if you can have a conversation with somebody that maybe has a question around, how the grass plant, is a living, breathing organism, and that, if we're not able to continue on with some of our very essential maintenance practices, it potentially will cause more harm than good to not only the fields, but then the ability for them to come back and be able to utilize those. They're definitely, the golf courses, I guess, they're a little bit more hidden in communities. The parks and that are a little bit more out, so there probably would be a little bit more questioning around that. But I think there's enough research, enough information out there that as long as there could be a conversation around the benefits of why you need to do it, then I think you can have those conversations with the folks that are maybe questioning it in the community and continue on. It's a matter of being able to have that voice at the table to at least try to explain, the why it's needed and why it's so important as a tool in taking care of turf and providing safe playable fields.
So I guess a question for you, and maybe even the general community in a sense, is what are some best practices, or what are some ways that we can help our crews communicate that importance? I mean, so it's great that we as the industry understand the importance, and that we're able to communicate it through beautiful infographics and those kind of things, but it's not necessarily the boots on the ground that are dealing with the public people that are asking those questions. So what are some things that we can do to help support them when they have those kind of interactions?
I think keeping the talking points very simple is key. Don't overwhelm them with too much that they need to say. I thought Rebecca's comment was spot on in terms of you're protecting a public asset, and I think people can understand that even if they don't understand the agronomic piece. These facilities and these fields cost money, and we're protecting that investment that was made. And I think that's a very simple and concise message that your crews could be armed with.
And it might be one of those things where you take, if you know you're in a sensitive area where there's going to be, some of that public pushback, maybe you make an index card that you give to your folks that are going to be out there on the front lines in the day-to-day operations, if it be aerification or bee mowing. Again, positioning it around the public asset, the why we are doing this, because it's a living, breathing organism. It needs to have certain inputs to be able to survive, but keep it high level and try to put the spin on it so the average person that just mows their home lawn knows about it. I like to use this scenario a lot of times, when turf managers go into board meetings and they either ask for, if it be equipment or if it be chemicals or, a big ticket item, let's say, unless you can relate to all the folks sitting around the board table, in terms of what they might know. For example, if it's a physician, talking about, the injury of a grass plant to an injury of relating to an injury of an individual, then they can start to conceptualize. I understand, that's why we have to do it. So it's trying to get our message, I think, into a high bullet point level to be able to say, here's why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah, I'll add very quickly that when I managed a staff who managed parks, we had a very involved community who was very vocal. So very simple, exactly like Matt said, simple canned talking points. And my staff had a badge, had an ID badge. In the back of their ID badge was my business cards. So if anybody wanted to engage any further, they were absolutely trained from day one to put my business card into that resident's hand, and we can talk as long as you want, because it's not the front line. It's not the front line employees' job to be making more sophisticated, possibly political commentary with local residents. That's not their job. So an easy access path to a manager or supervisor is my answer to that question.
That's great. Thank you. So I had a question here. Should PGRs be part of a minimum maintenance strategy, or is that something more on the enrichment and extra kind of situation? Or is it only contingency, where you only want to use that in scenarios like right now?
I think PGRs are a great way to reduce the amount of mowing that's needed and maintenance that's needed. If you have the budget and if you have the ability, because I know in some instances budgets have been more heavily scrutinized, even though the budget is there, they may not be allowed or may not be able to make the purchase. But if you are, certainly on cool season grasses, they're gonna stop it from growing up. That's for sure. And we've proven that through research time and time again.
Yeah, in a minimal maintenance scenario like we're in now, everybody's talking about plant growth regulators as a means to reduce labor inputs. You're going to get all the great benefits of plant growth regulators and reduced mowing need. In normal times, I'm a huge advocate, along with Jeff, of using them year round. Well, not exactly year round, throughout the entire growing season. But the one thing that I would caution people who are considering PGRs, who don't normally have it in their program, who are only using it as a temporary means to help reduce mowing, is make sure that you understand that there is a reapplication interval based on what product you use. So depending on what product you use, you can very reasonably expect when you're going to have to reapply it. That's a longer conversation, but if you only plan to apply it once, there's a very predictable, growth spurt at the end, a rebound effect that you're not going to like at all. So if we're talking about plant growth regulators, absolutely on day one, what is your ability to reapply at the recommended interval, and what products are we choosing based on that reapplication sort of ability? What kind of labor and equipment do you have available? And for people who don't know, plant growth regulators all need sprayed. They don't come as a granular. But
I will add to that under normal circumstances, when athletic fields in the Parks and Recs arena are getting abused, which is what happens to them. They don't get used, they get abused. I do not recommend using PGRs because of the lack of recovery that you see when you put those plants under growth regulation. They just don't grow enough to recover in the way we need to see them recover. So I am not an advocate of putting plant growth regulators into the Parks and Rec situation unless we're looking at a little bit higher level, whether it's a stadium type field or something like that we can control the amount of use. Because if it is under regulation and getting abused, the recovery of it will not be there.
But I guess I want to add to Rebecca, because I think she brought up a great point. There's been a lot of talk around PGR since this all started to happen. I mean, there was, it seemed like that was the, every webinar that I've been on, it's been a topic about using PGRs to try to help manage through this whole entire process. But it is absolutely paramount to understand that it can't be a one and done type of thing. It has to be something that you're going to commit to through a time period to get you through what you think is going to be that ultimate. We're going to be back to maybe some semblance of normal when it happens, or else you're gonna create probably a bigger issue by putting those just one app of PGR down. So Rebecca brings up a very, very good point that you gotta be able to look at it on a little bit longer interval and be able to spread that out so you're not causing more damage than good.
And that interval is different for every product. So
absolutely.
Do it according to label directions.
Absolutely.
Reading directions. Okay. So equipment, it's an important thing. We all have to deal with equipment, but we all deal with different kinds of equipment. Some people, a hammer is a universal tool. What are some absolute minimum pieces of equipment that we should have in our repertoire? And what are some things that maybe there may be more economical options that we can use, or ways to get by things like, for example, dragging the baseball fields. I've seen the really fancy, tiny pieces of equipment, and I've also seen a bedspread getting dragged behind a lawnmower. So what are some absolute needed tools?
Well, yours is better than the ones I've seen. I've seen bed springs behind pickup trucks at 70 miles an hour going around the field like this. And
hey, don't talk about Dan that way.
You don't want to pull me into this, boy.
I'll let the equipment folks handle this, but I think we've already talked about, and I will use an example with a group that I worked with, and we had a demo unit. I won't name the name of the company, but we had a demo unit of a mower that was much more so than we actually needed to have. But they said, well, we can't afford that. And my comment was, how can you afford not to have this? We know the quality of not only the equipment, but also the quality of turf that we will produce with one additional mowing. And they were paying, instead of paying for a larger piece of equipment and one person's salary, they were using 0-turn mowers and 12 people on 62-inch mower decks, and doing it in twice as much time, and their carbon footprint's larger, and all those other things that we don't need to sit here and talk about on a webinar. We all know those things. So make sure you have the right piece of equipment for the job. And mowing, we can't stress that enough. I mean, mowing, right? We have to have the equipment to be able to do that. And now is not the time to go out and do a PO for a brand new, 5-deck mower, but certainly it maybe made us wake up and realize, oh, I should have made sure that I had this stuff going into this to be prepared. Not like being short of ventilators or respirators like hospitals are, but kind of make you realize that I don't have the equipment that I need to do the job that I need to be able to do, and start to put together a plan to be able to make those purchases or leases or whatever kind of arrangements you can work, because no matter what the equipment is, it's all about the tool.
Yeah, and Jeff brings up a good point. I think it really, I mean, the key thing, I think, as we go forward out of this is making sure, the reality is going to be, we're going to be probably under budget constraints, not only this year, but probably the following year, and who knows, how quickly it rebounds after that. And that's going to be probably all sectors of the turf industry when you look at it. There's not really one that's spared. It's going to be probably quite a wide breadth as you go forward. So really, what's going to be key is finding the efficient product to do what you need to do on your field. Jeff brought up a good point. Does it make sense if I'm going to be restricted on labor and not be able to find personnel to have, a arsenal of 10 mowers sitting in my shed if I only can put 3 bodies on 3 of them? That's not being efficient. It's probably not allowing you to get the work done on your facilities that you need to get done. So I think one of the keys going forward is going to be able to, finding the most efficient piece of machine to get the work done, and probably those tighter work windows that we're going to have as we get back into the new norm of things as we go forward. And that really is not only just on mowing equipment. It could be, on, what you're applying, if it be a sprayer, if it be a fertilizer machine, if it be, the drag units on your ball fields. I think all those, you need to look at those as a, how can I do my job, probably with more constraints on it than I've ever probably had since I've been in this position, and do it the most efficiently and effective way, and also know that I can rely on, that piece of equipment that I'm going to entrust to be able to do that.
I know that we're nearing. Can I toss out one piece of equipment that if you didn't have it going into this crisis, you desperately wish that you had it? It was a large blower, either a PTO-driven 3-point hitch blower that can go on a tractor, or something you can attach to your utility vehicle, like a 25, 30 horsepower turbine blower. Those have been invaluable, as normally in sports turf, we don't collect clippings, and as mowing frequencies have gotten thrown a little out of whack and that sort of thing, if you have a large blower to help clean things up, I've had more guys raving about that piece of equipment, lately than anything else. And maybe that's helpful, maybe it's not.
Just blow it over to the next property if you get a big enough one.
Definitely.
Well, I want to be respectful of everybody's time. We have hit our hour for our webinar. If there are any specific questions that we have not touched on, please send me an email at bk@prps.org. I will be sending out final information. I have a handout just to kind of cover some of the points that we covered here in our discussion. And if you would also like a copy of this webinar, please put your email in the chat box before you bail out. Is there any final comments from our panelists that you would like to say before we finish off?
I'd just like to say thank you for organizing this, BK. You know, it's great that we can get on and talk and share some, you know, thoughts and ideas that we've either experienced or heard as we go through these changing times. And you know, we're always here to help if there's additional questions.
Yeah, BK, will this be posted on the PRPS or the PPMI website somewhere?
I will put them on both, actually. So we will be able to find them on the Park Maintenance Institute website as well as on Pennsylvania Recreation and Park Society websites as well.
BK, if I can jump in, this is Dan Hendy. I'm the education manager for PRPS. And I really have to say we have a very big COVID-19 site, pandemic site, which is like, we've been collecting materials for almost a month now, and there's a lot of recordings from different virtual roundtables, not only the park maintenance that you're working on right now, but other areas of recreation and parks. So we encourage you to go onto that site, look for resources, also with the PMI site. There's just a lot there. And again, I would echo what BK was saying, like, please leave your email address and we'll make sure that you get a set of these links and the paper that BK was referring to. Thank you.
And thank you, Dan. Actually, I am currently working on our next webinar. The topic actually is going to be kind of the opposite of what we were doing, is in the no, mow, and meadow control. So a little bit a different aspect in parks. So not on the sports turf, but open